Well, that's always the thing. We know how the perception of guns go with certain folks in certain corners in certain situations in the country, and it's pretty much on full display. But the thing is, if you're disgusted by that, which I can see reasons for that, we should be disgusted about all those forms. Because there might be people that are afraid of old white guys holding big ass guns. Maybe there's a group of a country that's afraid of them. Maybe we should worry about them too, rather than just the folks that are afraid of black folks holding guns. Because I think we all need to chill out. We've chilled out long enough here on the show. Thank you, Brett, for joining me on the program today. I hope you enjoy your week. Try and calm down.
I don't know how to turn it back on. I do too. Everybody watch Happy Half Hour pretty soon. Pew, 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 pew,
the flag coming out saying bang. It's the way it works. Thanks for joining me, man. Thank you guys all for being here on the program. Up next is the Young Turks. Anna Kasparian leads the first hour. She goes solo to tell you guys what's up. But John Iderola joins her for the second hour to smooth things out. Join them. It'll be fun. We'll see y'all tomorrow.
Woo! It's us!
What's up, everyone? Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and today we are going to touch on some controversial issues. Of course, there's a housing-related story that you definitely need to know about in the first hour. And if you have any loved ones who are elderly and they're looking to sell their homes, just make sure that they're privy to the story that I'm gonna share with you today. We're also gonna talk about the migrant crisis, which is in fact impacting various cities across the country. And to be quite frank with you, I think the response from the Biden administration and congressional Democrats has been weak, to say the least, and I'll make my case in just a little bit. In the second hour, John Iadarola will be joining in well, there's a lot to get to. We're gonna talk about Jimmy Fallon's workers and some of the terrible notices they've been getting about the future of their employment for his show. We're also going to talk a little bit about what's transpiring with the gaming industry. There's a big settlement to the tune of $100 million that I wanna tell you all about. And one of my favorite stories today actually has to do with Candace Owens defending herself over a decision she made about her own children. You gotta stay tuned to figure out what that is. But as always, just wanna encourage you all to like and share the stream if you're watching us live. You can also become a member by clicking on that join button if you're watching us on YouTube, or you can go to tyt.com/join and become a member. That way, members help to keep us afloat, keep us independent of any corporate influence. And more importantly, you guys get awesome members only content, bonus episodes. I feel like we've been killing it lately with bonus episodes. We've been having fun, we've been keeping it light. You know, Cenk and I randomly had a debate about capitalism last week that you should definitely check out. Lots of fun stuff. So anyway, with all that said, let's get to this immigration issue because it's quite a doozy. You should know about it.
And what happened this weekend? A person on the terrorist watch list from Afghanistan was just coming across this border. Why? You know, we caught more people in the month of February on the terrorist watch list than we caught the entire time of the last administration.
I don't think that's the insult to the Biden administration he thinks it is. Now, Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy very likely didn't realize it at the time, but saying that the Biden administration has caught more terrorists at the southern border than the Trump administration had isn't the own he thinks it is. Now, of course, the main objective for McCarthy was to trash the Biden administration after Title 42 came to an end. Now, the measure, which was implemented under the Trump administration, cited the coronavirus pandemic as the excuse to avoid having to process asylum seekers, and also allowed for automatic deportations before migrants could even have their case heard before an immigration judge. Now that Title 42 has been lifted, the southern border has experienced an influx of people hoping to make their asylum case. While McCarthy's accidental admission is pretty funny, it would be a massive mistake for Democrats to just snicker and think that they're making the right moves on the migrant crisis. In fact, go to New York City specifically, or Chicago, and you'll get a completely different story. Rallies and protests have sprung up after local communities have learned that the little resources they have to care for their own residents must now be stretched even thinner to provide services for migrants.
Border processing centers slammed. Newly released court documents reveal more than 6,400 migrants were released into the US last Thursday and Friday. In Chicago, there are now pop-up showers for migrants living in police stations. While in New York City, parents and even students are protesting a new plan to temporarily house asylum seekers in school gyms. What worries you most?
I don't know these people. Why can't they send them someplace else?
The immigration debate now spilling into the suburbs too. Orange County, New York granted a temporary restraining order, stopping more migrants from being bused to local hotels for now. The county executive says homeless veterans were pushed out of hotel housing early to make way.
The 20 veterans that were displaced, that is really sends a bad message.
You can't just drop a bombshell on them and kick them back out to the streets. Leave the veterans alone.
No, that's a disaster. In fact, New York is so overwhelmed with migrants that they need to shelter that Mayor Eric Adams is now saying that he wants to loosen right to shelter laws in New York. That is not good. Now, Biden knew this was coming, and his administration clearly did little to prepare for it. At the height of the humanitarian crisis on Monday, more than 3,300 unprocessed migrants were left in squalor on El Paso streets, even while there were beds available in shelters. That number of unhoused people creates a powder keg of problems amid the desperation, local leaders say. Trash and excrement, the potential for migrants to be targeted for prostitution, and a trapped population for human smugglers. If there are beds and shelters available in El Paso, why aren't they being used to house migrants? I mean, it makes no sense, right? Well, there's a little known flaw in how resources can be utilized that the Biden administration could do something about, but they won't. The federal government only reimburses shelters that help migrants who have been processed and have the right documents. Since the funding stream was created in 2019, it was intended for migrants who had been processed by US Customs and Border Protection. It was not supposed to cover food and shelter for migrants who entered illegally and have not sought asylum. In other words, federal resources cannot be spent on undocumented immigrants. Before 2019, FEMA would actually reimburse programs that helped all migrants and did not limit resources to documented migrants. In 2022, John Martin, who runs Martin's Opportunity Center in El Paso, Texas, specifically asked President Biden if there could be an exception made for shelters specifically in border towns. So far, the answer is no. Government and nonprofit organizations at the US-Mexico border say the federal government has tied their hands with a funding stream that only reimburses them for aiding documented migrants. But are their hands actually tied? Or is there just, this lack of will to cut the red tape? Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said the restriction tying that funding to migrants processed by DHS is necessary and appear to suggest NGOs should tackle the problem on their own. Wow, just great plan. Now, Biden could have spent the last year fighting to change the rule or push for much needed immigration reform. But Sleepy Joe couldn't be bothered, I guess. Martin also told USA Today that it's not just El Paso, it's every community along the southern border. The city and county and NGOs are all working together. It's a very good response system to the need, but now we've got the federal laws working against us. And look, the consequences for border communities and the migrants are dire to say the least. Father Daniel Mora, who opens the doors of El Paso's historic Sacred Heart Catholic Church to the migrants, notes that, quote, people are eating only once a day, end quote. Not only is this a horrifying humanitarian crisis, but Biden bungling this is a huge political liability for Democrats who have taken the core of their base for granted, honestly, for far too long. Take the residents of Chicago's South Side as an example. They recently found out that a high school that's been abandoned in their neighborhood would be used to house hundreds of migrants. South Shore community advocate Natasha Dunn argues that her community is already struggling with poverty, crime, and a lack of resources.
They have intentionally created barriers to impede participation in a decision-making process around the public school buildings we pay taxes to maintain, and that they unjustly close and ignoring the community's plea to keep them open. Communication regarding meetings that have been held have been lackluster. What kind of Jim Crow stuff is this? All black stakeholders that have concerns should have been afforded the adequate space and notice and decision which ultimately impacts the value of our land, safety, and peace. We have been redlined, Jim Crow, pushed out enough.
And look, if the federal government continues to fail to pass any comprehensive immigration reform, and the Biden administration fails to provide the resources these communities need in order to take in an influx of migrants, obviously you're gonna have a problem. And by the way, something I've noticed is usually these migrants are sent to the poorer parts of these cities where the residents in those areas have to deal with the consequences with little to no resources to do so. They're not sending migrants to the wealthier parts of Chicago or the wealthier parts of Manhattan. Now, while Texas Governor Greg Abbott has no doubt used desperate human beings as pawns in his disgusting political game, the ongoing efforts to bus migrants to democratically run cities is proving a devastating point about Democratic leadership. It's easy for politicians from the left side of the aisle to pat themselves on the back by declaring their jurisdictions sanctuaries for migrants, especially when they're not governing border towns and had mostly been untouched by the migrant crisis. They love to engage in the theater, but they don't like to actually work on policy. But now that they're confronted by the realities that states like Texas have been dealing with, they actually have to, put some thought behind policy instead of just engaging in self-righteous posturing. And if they don't do so soon, I predict an increasing number of Democratic voters who tend to be sympathetic to migrants will slowly switch to endorsing right-wing approaches on immigration, which are transparently much more cruel. Congressional Republicans, for instance, don't want to spend any federal dollars on any migrants. For the GOP, it doesn't even matter if the migrants are documented or not. Other Republican lawmakers want to severely limit legal avenues for asylum. If Democrats only engage in theater, the GOP will win over hearts and minds on this issue. The scary thing is that we don't have a strong, savvy, or even competent Democratic Party working to prevent that. So one thing that's very noticeable is if you watch, let's say MSNBC, they pretend as though everyone's happy with how the Biden administration is handling this, that everyone in these democratically run cities is welcoming migrants with open arms. They're super happy about what's going on. That is not the case. I can totally understand the frustrations that these communities are feeling. They are not bad people for protesting. They need resources, they need assistance with this, they need help. And so far they've got nothing. Because again, we're dealing with a federal government that engages in theater endlessly, postures and does all sorts of rhetorical garbage in order to pander to voters. But when push comes to shove, are they actually accomplishing what needs to be accomplished to deal with issues that we're facing in this country, including this migrant crisis? The answer is no. And if Biden thinks he's going to win against a Republican candidate, very likely Donald Trump, on this issue, he would be mistaken. It's time for them to get serious about doing something about this, about actually fighting back against the Republican Party when on one hand they say they want to do something about immigration reform, but on the other hand they try to obstruct any efforts. So call them out, work harder, fight them on this. But we haven't seen any of that, and local communities are suffering as a result. All right, we gotta take a quick break. When we come back, I'm gonna tell you about how those signs you might have come across saying that they'll buy your ugly house, they might for a very, very low price and essentially rob you. That and more coming up. Ice cream. Welcome to our first social break. Lots of thoughts here from our members. I'm actually gonna start with the throat goat dragon because I think the comment here is indicative of how people are feeling in these communities that are, taking in the migrants. So the comment is, as a resident of New York City, I have no problem with our city making room for as many migrants as possible. My problem is with the state and federal governments leaving this mess on the city's doorstep without any financial aid or help from the city government. I totally agree with you. I think that's exactly right. I really want to emphasize that segment and the protests that were covered in that segment weren't meant to spread some anti-migrant sentiment at all. But it is meant to point to I hate to use this phrase, but it's true, the virtue signaling that you see among Democratic lawmakers when it comes to immigrants, but they don't actually want to do anything. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's one thing to say like, yeah, we're a sanctuary city. They're not a border town. They really don't have to deal with an influx of migrants or anything like that, but they like to do the virtue signaling. When push comes to shove though, are they allocating the necessary resources to take care of migrants as they come to the United States to ensure that cities are properly resourced to deal with an influx of migrants? No, they don't. So that's my big issue. Like, I'm so tired of the theater on both sides for sure. But it's even more frustrating among Democrats because those are the people who are supposed to be fighting for the downtrodden, right? And I just don't see that happening at all. Vicky writes in and says, Joe Biden has done only one thing in office. He wasn't Trump. Just imagine the scenario in which Biden and Trump are running against each other again, which by the way, very likely to happen. And you have all these communities angry and frustrated over what's happening right now. They're gonna hear Trump do his typical disgusting demagoguing and we know what his anti-immigrant rhetoric sounds like. I'm just concerned about how things could further devolve in the future as a result of the incompetence that we're seeing among Democrats. Tuck Cucker Farlson says, now suddenly they care about homeless vets. I know, right? But like, think about how terrible that is. Like, pushing the homeless vets out of their shelter to make room for migrants. Like, that's not going to play well. It's just, this is such a crazy story. Anyway, let's move on to our Twitch subs. Rye, the therapy dragon says, Wednesday bonus episodes are the absolute best. I agree. I try to keep the rundown as minimal as possible so John and I can just kind of have a good time and talk about fun stuff. Fidlin Nero says Biden could have, but that would have cut into his important time selling out America to the GOP and napping. By the way, he's already signaled that he's likely to concede to Republicans on work requirements. Unbearable. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. I'm Anna Kasparian, and since it's Wednesday, you can expect at least one housing-related story. So here we go. Here you have it. Chances are you've been confronted by a bandit or two in your life. They're ugly, illegal, and can really destroy the aesthetic of your neighborhood. And while they might seem bold and bright, you should make no mistake, some of them are definitely trying to rob you. Here's a bandit sign from a company known as Home Vestors. Signs like these are known as bandit signs and are according to new reporting from ProPublica, they're pretty aptly named. ProPublica has revealed that the business practices of Home Vestors of America, which is the company behind the "We Buy Ugly Houses" bandit signs, are predatory and have robbed some Americans of their homes, financial security, and peace of mind. Now, Home Vestors of America is a franchise in the so-called wholesale real estate business, and its franchisees, like all business owners, seek to maximize their profits. But in this business model, profits are reliant on buying distressed properties for the lowest price possible to then sell for the highest price possible. And unlike other home flippers, wholesalers usually don't do renovations before selling the property to a buyer. According to ProPublica, Homevestors of America was founded in 1996 by a Texas real estate broker who developed a system for snapping up so-called problem properties. Since then, the business grew to nearly 1,150 franchises in 48 states. Homevestors likes to think of its business model as somehow above the fray. Homevestors, the self-proclaimed largest home buyer in the United States, goes to great lengths to distinguish itself from the hedge funds and YouTube gurus that have taken over large swaths of the real estate investment market. The company says it helps homeowners out of jams, ugly houses, and ugly situations, improving lives and communities by taking on properties no one else would buy. But honestly, Homevestors sounds a lot like the YouTube gurus it seeks to differentiate itself from. Lowballing home sellers is the name of the game. And Rick Jin, who hosts a home flipping YouTube channel called Flip with Rick, is pretty candid about it.
When you make your initial offer on any wholesale or really any investment deal, remember, wholesaling is about getting the absolute best price to maximize the profit in any type of real estate deal. When you make your first offer, it should be embarrassingly low. How do I know it's low, Rick? Let me tell you this. When you feel brutally uncomfortable and actually a little bit nervous and scared, you are definitely in the right place. If you thought making a lowball offer is gut-wrenching, if you make too high of an offer on your first one and they say yes right off the bat, I gotta tell you, it is a helpless feeling. I have done this multiple times and I learned my lesson. That feeling of making an offer too much is so much worse than that awkward, uncomfortable lowball offer in the beginning. If you were gonna make a $100,000 offer and you were like fine with it, drop it down to like 60. Rick, $40,000, that's insane. Well, let me ask you this. What if they take your previous offer? Say you're gonna offer $100,000 and they say yes. That means you left $40,000 on the table.
If lowballing people who are looking to sell their homes is the main ingredient in maximizing profits, there's inevitably going to be some gross conduct taking place, especially if the investors are looking for sellers in desperate situations. Take what happened to one of the elderly homeowners who was profiled by ProPublica named Corrine Casanova. Casanova and her husband bought their Los Angeles bungalow in the 1960s, and after dutifully paying her mortgage for decades, she owned it outright. But her husband had since passed away, and in 2016, she was looking to sell her biggest asset and move into an assisted living facility. So she decided to call the number she saw on a Homevestors ad. Soon she found herself working with a guy named Corey Evans, who ProPublica describes as well-versed in the Homevestors of America playbook. In the 2 years prior, Evans executed more than 50 deals by finding homeowners who needed to sell fast because they were in a desperate situation. When it comes to Casanova, there was a big problem. She was 82 years old and was suffering from dementia. In fact, a recent neurological assessment had found the 82-year-old was unable to say what year it was or name the city she was in. She routinely mistook her adult son for his uncle. When she crossed paths with Evans in an effort to sell her home, the deal was anything but for Casanova. By the time he left that evening, Evans had a contract to buy the house for roughly 2/3 of its value. Casanova's son David decided to, pay for an appraisal after learning about the contract his mother had signed. The appraisal put the home's value at $440,000, a whopping $165,000 more than Evans had offered. The contract would spur years of legal battles and heartache. David, her son, let Evans know that his mother had dementia and wanted to cancel the sale. But Evans didn't care, and in fact decided to record a notice on the home's title that prevented the Casanovas from selling to another buyer. The family suddenly found themselves in a multi-year legal battle to keep the home. Corinne Casanova died just 19 days after she signed the contract to sell her home for much less than it was worth. And unfortunately, stories like these they're not that rare. Katie Southard owned a HomeVestors franchise in North Carolina and candidly admitted to ProPublica that when it comes to sellers, quote, "You're always lying to them. That's what we were trained. There was a price that you could pay, but you would always go lower and tell them that was the price you could pay." There are many examples to prove this point. A man in Broward County, Florida, believed he was signing a document for a home equity loan that in reality was a contract to sell his $100,000 house for just $37,500, according to a lawsuit he filed, but ultimately abandoned. A woman in Arizona said in an interview, she was told her late mother's home in a popular outdoor recreation town would have to be torn down and rebuilt to fetch a fair price. After paying her just $10,000, the HomeVestors franchise sold it for $55,000 without making any improvements. One court case documented the plight of an elderly man in Florida who was told if he sold his condo, he could continue living there temporarily. But he spent his final days alive waiting to be evicted because after the contract was signed, the franchise owner informed him the homeowners association rules didn't allow him to stay in the property. As if these specific cases aren't tragic and heart-wrenching enough, ProPublica notes that some homeowners fought from hospital beds to keep their properties. At least 3 died shortly after signing sales contracts. A 4th died after 3 years of worrying about money. Their families told ProPublica that they are convinced that the stress of losing their houses contributed to their loved ones' deaths, though all had been ill. HomeVestors swears that lying is against its code of ethics and that they specifically train franchisees to stay away from sellers who show signs of mental decline. But its training manuals teach something known as the Sandler system. Central to this sales strategy is building rapport with homeowners in order to find the pain. Pain is always a form of motivation, the training manual reads. Once you find the seller's pain, you have a much better chance of buying the house. They look for circumstances that can lead to a quick sale, like a job loss, pending foreclosure, or overwhelming medical bills. One former franchisee described how he found a potential Atlanta seller's pain by asking the homeowner why he needed to sell so fast. The answer? His mother was living out her final days in hospice 1,400 miles away. It's not because they want to sell the house, the former franchisee said. It's because they want to get to Colorado to see their dying mother. How HomeVestors advertises their services also says a lot about their business model. In an interview, a former employee of the ad agency hired by HomeVestors recalled discussions about how to serve online ads to people in the vicinity of nursing homes and rehabilitation hospitals. The goal was to catch families who needed to sell assets so Medicaid would pay their nursing home costs. The employee, who asked not to be named because they unfortunately still work in the industry, also recalled the agency's owner bragging about the ability of its advertising, its digital advertising, to find an elderly person who had broken a hip. That injury, the employee reported, the owner saying, is effectively a 60-day countdown to death and possibly a deal. Now, franchisees also generate their own leads, so they're advised to build relationships with nursing home administrators, probate officers, and even divorce lawyers for intel. They're also instructed to look for clues of distress, like utility shutoff notices, boarded up windows, or any sign of desperation they can pounce on. If a family's belongings are on the curb, for example, the directive is clear. Quickly pursue the property where the trash pile indicates eviction. And if you're wondering if there are regulations to protect people from these predatory business practices, it really depends on the state you live in. Now, ProPublica claims that the practice has come under regulatory scrutiny in several states. In Philly, for example, flippers are required to provide prospective sellers with a bill of rights that identifies resources to help desperate homeowners and describes how they can get a fair price. But federally speaking, and this should be unsurprising, the short answer is largely no. And they play by different rules compared to real estate agents. So unlike real estate agents, house flippers operate in a largely unregulated space. Real estate agents have a fiduciary responsibility to represent a homeowner's best interests in negotiations, which is defined in state laws, licensing requirements, and also in an industry code of ethics. But in most states, flippers don't even need a license. So what does Homevestors have to say about all of this? Well, for one, they tried to, bury ProPublica's reporting, according to a subsequent ProPublica piece, noting that the We Buy Ugly Houses company held a virtual meeting for its franchisees to outline a plan to minimize visibility of their investigation. In an official statement to ProPublica, through a spokesperson, Homevestors claimed that the horrible and predatory deals represent just a tiny fraction, just a small fraction of the company's overall transactions. Then they boasted about their high customer ratings, which I personally found laughable. A Homevestors spokesperson denied the company had targeted the elderly and pointed to a 96% approval rating among homeowners who sell to Homevestors, which was calculated internally from what the company says was over 500 customer reviews. Oh, and they did an internal aggregation of possible positive reviews saying that the company is great. Awesome, I guess nothing to see here. Why am I even talking about this? Like, obviously I'm being sarcastic. That's a ridiculous response to very real issues that are now coming out of these business practices. Now, within days of receiving questions from ProPublica, Homevestors prohibited its franchises from recording documents to prevent homeowners from canceling sales and discourage them from suing sellers. The practices not only affect the seller, the company noted, it creates a paper trail that reporters and prosecutors can follow to a franchise's doorsteps. And if you're doing this on a serial basis, they say, you're putting the entire system at risk. Homevestors General Counsel Anthony Lowenberg said during a national call on April 18th to alert franchise owners to ProPublica's upcoming story. Looks like good muckraking reporting can really make a difference. ProPublica certainly has, and the same, unfortunately, can't be said of our federal lawmakers and regulators who have allowed these swindlers to basically be predators and operate with impunity. But I don't want this story to end on a sour note, because there was one man who fought for justice. Unlike a lot of Americans, David Casanova, the gentleman that we talked about earlier in the story, had the resources of time and money to fight Corey Evans after his dementia-riddled mother was swindled by him. After Patriot Holdings sued to hold the Casanovas to the sales contract, David filed a cross complaint alleging fraud and elder abuse. Evans, he claimed, used affection, intimidation, and coercion to get his mother, Corinne, to sign the contract. Patriot Holdings, the franchisee for Homevestors, fought for the house for nearly 3 years and just would not give up until Evans ended up being the subject of a criminal investigation over his dealings with 2 elderly victims in Ventura County, California. In August of 2020, Evans pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts of attempted grand theft of real property. He received a suspended jail sentence, dropped his lawsuits against both victims, and paid restitution. He was prohibited from any transaction involving the purchase or sale of real estate during his probation. After the war was over, David was able to sell the house for a lot more than what Corey Evans was willing to pay for it. David sold it for $510,000, $235,000 more than Evans had tried to pay for it. David said he did none of the repairs Evans had insisted under oath were necessary. But clearly he was still able to sell the home for quite a bit of money and quite a bit more than what Evans had offered. All right, well, let's move on to another story involving business practices that should absolutely infuriate you because subscription services are coming to a car near you. Car companies are looking to cash in by charging you subscriptions for special features that, for the time being, are already included in the purchase price of your car. But why charge consumers one time when automakers could be charging you monthly for the perk of using your seat warmers? They're calling it features on demand, and it's going to make owning a car even more expensive than it already is.
As the automakers can add technology on the fly through things they call features on demand or car subscription services, we're seeing more and more of these software and even hardware type upgrades coming to cars with a subscription type model. BMW famously about a year ago tried to have people pay for heated seats. This functionality is already in the car, but in order to turn it on, if you didn't buy it from the factory, they wanted you to pay a subscription. So they did that abroad. People heard about it here, very upsetting about that. Mercedes just added the ability to add acceleration boost to its EVs via subscription. And then Toyota did the same thing with their connected features on their phone. You want to unlock the car or do things like that, you have to pay an extra fee by month to do these connected features on your phone.
Let's unpack the point made about BMW charging people for the heated seats to really internalize how insane this is. The seat warmers are already built into the car. The only thing BMW would get paid to do is turn the warmers on remotely, and that potentially translates to big profits with very little effort or cost for BMW. Here's another example by Mercedes, which announced that it would allow owners of the EQ series EVs to unlock more power through a subscription feature activated through the Mercedes app. The costs are pretty significant. For instance, for the EQE 350 4MATIC EV, great name, Mercedes notes prices of $60 per month, $600 a year, or just a lifetime cost. You could do a one-time lifetime cost of, nearly $2,000 to unlock an additional 60 horsepower. Kind of creepy that the horsepower of your vehicle can be manipulated remotely by the car company, right? If you hate this, don't worry because you've got company. A new study from Cox Automotive this week found that 69% of respondents said that if certain features were available only via subscription for a particular brand, they would likely shop elsewhere. But if all car companies start rolling out features on demand, and many already are, consumers won't really have many options. Yahoo Finance reports that despite the rage that automakers are already noticing among car buyers, they're pushing ahead because they're counting on billions of dollars in revenue from subscription services. The editor-in-chief of the automotive research firm Edmunds told Yahoo Finance, quote, "I think the general view is that this isn't going anywhere because most automakers have seen this as a significant revenue source. And that's not just luxury brands. GM has been very open about it. Ford is working on it. So this is the new frontier of how to generate revenue and honestly, how to make Americans and car buyers even more miserable than they already are. And by the way, he's right. Automakers have already included subscription fees in their financial models to predict their revenue and profits. Wall Street analysts and investors are counting on these additional dollars, beefing up the bottom line in future quarters, and thus boosting share prices. And look, as we all know, shareholder profits reign supreme, folks. We, the consumers, will just have to shell out cash for things that were once included in the purchase price of our cars so that the precious investors get a nice return on the brave act of parking their money in car companies in the quest for passive income. That's how this all works. Just when you think life couldn't get more complicated and more costly, companies find a way to do it. They're always gonna find ways to do it. They've gotta maximize profits on behalf of their shareholders, and that's exactly what's happening with these subscription services for vehicles. It's insane. We gotta take a quick break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including some stories involving corruption. Don't miss it, we'll be right back. Ice cream. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to our super chats, starting with Yoda4, who says, thank you. You've been watching the show since 2007, and you say that I'm more gorgeous and intelligent than when you started watching. I appreciate that, very sweet. Stinky Feet says, I don't know if this is considered a right-wing stance or not, but I heard about legislation that would ban foreign investors from buying up homes in the United States. As someone looking for a house, I agree. As someone who's not looking for a house, I agree. This is something I've been talking about for quite some time. I don't have a problem with foreign investment in US real estate if we weren't dealing with a housing shortage. But we are dealing with a housing shortage, and those homes should be, saved for Americans who actually want to live here and have their lives here. Let's move on to Mohit, who says, I love TYT Wednesdays with Professor Anna Kasparian giving us detailed analysis and breakdowns of important stories. I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. Ezra Graves says, we're all God's children until it's time to care for them. What elsewhere is there for them to go? Yeah, I mean, look, I don't agree with that woman's comment from that video, but I will say these cities should get the resources in order to properly care for people. You get what I'm saying? Like, I don't think that the way this is being handled is okay. It's not fair to the migrants. It's not fair to the local populations that are, dealing with an influx of migrants. It's just everyone loses in how this is being handled right now. Banana Dragon says, 271,000 Ukrainian refugee migrants were admitted to the United States with no news or ill treatments, but when it's migrants of a different race, it becomes a political issue and the media trumpets the horrors of these migrants. I don't think the people protesting are talking about the horrors of these migrants, but think about this. If you are a homeless veteran who gets pushed out of shelter in order to make room for migrants, I mean, think about it. You served in the military, you risked your life to do so, and this is how the country treats you. It's not fair to the vets, it's not fair to the migrants who are maybe dealing with some hostility as a result of what's going on. But I do hear you. I do absolutely think there's racism built into some of the immigration policy decisions that are made. And yeah, I mean, the other thing about immigrants from Ukraine, criticizing that would mean maybe even being critical of the US's involvement in that war. And no one wants that. Like anyone who even asks questions about like, hey, maybe we should rethink our involvement, just everyone like tackles them. No, what we're doing is the right thing. We can't question it. I have a problem with that too. Anyway, we gotta get back to the show. Back to the show. We've got two more stories for you, and they're both kind of related since they have to do with corruption. Why don't we start off with, let's take a look at what happened to a congressional Democrat who was successfully primaried by a progressive. What is he up to these days? After losing to the progressive who primaried him, former Representative Kurt Schrader has landed himself a cushy job at a firm that lobbies on behalf of the same pharmaceutical companies he assisted in price gouging the American people. That should come as no surprise, considering Schrader took hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions from Big Pharma during his time in Congress. Surely there's no connection there, right? Now, if you're not familiar with the corrupt former Democratic lawmaker, I can give you a quick rundown. Schrader represented Oregon's 5th district as a Democrat from 2007 to 2020. During his time in Congress, he voted against a bill that would ban assault weapons. He also voted against raising the COVID stimulus checks from $1,400 to $2,000, repeatedly opposed an increase to the federal minimum wage, and even initially opposed the second impeachment of Donald Trump after the January 6th Capitol riots. Perhaps most infamously, Schrader opposed allowing Medicare to negotiate the prices of prescription drugs. I mean, look, it doesn't take a genius to figure out why. The health and pharmaceutical industries donated a staggering amount of money to Schrader during his time as a representative. So let's take a look at that. According to Open Secrets, for instance, the health professionals industry donated more than $972,000 to Schrader. The pharmaceutical and health products industry was also quite generous and bought Schrader having donated more than $742,000 to the lawmaker. Now, after he was called out for opposing the Medicare price negotiation provision back in 2021, the now former congressman gave this pathetic defense of his corruption. He said this: if pharma thinks they're buying a vote, they're getting a bad deal. I personally am proud of the work my grandfather did and developing mass production for Pfizer. He saved millions of American lives during World War II. But that in no way influences the work I do. Yes, it should be noted that Schrader's grandfather was vice president and director of biochemical and research development at Pfizer. Now, Schrader also claims a common fallacy the average person has is the reason they give you money is because you say you're going to vote for this or vote for that. I've never, ever done that. And I don't know many legislators that do that. They just want to have access to at least just plead their case. That's all they want, folks. These poor lobbyists, they shell out so much money because they just want to plead their case. Now, thankfully, Schrader's voters didn't buy that BS and voted him out. So big win on that. Now, after all, the provision that he opposed was extremely popular. It turns out that if you vote against the will of the people, there are consequences for it, and I love to see it. Now, in April of 2022, a poll revealed that 83% of all likely voters supported giving Medicare the power to negotiate lower prices for prescription drugs. Specifically, 86% of Democrats supported it, And 81% of independents and Republicans supported it. Because guess what? People don't like seeing our hard-earned taxpayer money go to waste as these pharmaceutical companies price gouge the Medicare system. But today, Schrader is still sitting pretty in the pocket of Big Pharma. On Thursday, May 11th, Williams and Jensen PLLC announced that former Congressman Kurt Schrader will be joining the firm as a principal after more than 25 years in public service. Williams and Jensen is a lobbying firm that, according to Li Fong, lobbies on behalf of Pfizer, Eli Lilly, Bayer, Merck, and Amgen. In announcing their new hire, the chair and CEO of Williams and Jensen pretended as though Schrader is a hard worker, saying that Congressman Schrader has a track record of rolling up his sleeves and leading on policy issues. We are delighted to welcome him to the firm, and we know that he will be an invaluable resource to our clients. But remember who he rolled his sleeves up to work hard for. It wasn't for you, it was against you. And on behalf of the companies that he's now helping to buy off his former Democratic colleagues. This is how the system works. And unless we pass strong regulations and potentially a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics and push for publicly financed elections, we're just gonna have an entire Congress, an entire political system really, that's bought off by corporate interests. That's why in each policy where you see widespread support, we don't get what we need, we don't get what we want, because our voice, our vote tends to be less important. It tends to pale in comparison to the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars corporations pour into campaign coffers, including those of Democratic lawmakers. All right, well, there's more corruption to get to, so let's talk a little bit about that. As we speak, members of the House GOP and especially Oversight Committee Chair James Comer are on the warpath against President Joe Biden and his family members, who Republicans accuse of collecting foreign cash in exchange for influence over American foreign policy. Now, while legalized bribes are an anti-democratic and destructive element within our government, Comer has embarrassed himself by failing to prove any illegality or wrongdoing by President Biden. Many people are saying this, even conservative talk show hosts on Fox.
I know the Republicans said that the smoking gun were these financial records that you were able to subpoena and got your hands on. They show that some of the president's relatives were paid more than $10 million from foreign sources between 2015 and 2017. And your party, the Republican investigators, say that that's proof of influence peddling by Hunter and James. But that's just your suggestion. You don't actually have any facts to that point. You've got some circumstantial evidence. And the other thing is, of all those names, the one person who didn't profit is there's no evidence that Joe Biden did anything illegally.
Well, if you look at the laptop and the emails between the president's son and his associates, they went to great lengths to hide Joe's involvement. They even gave him nicknames. They called him the Celtic and the big guy.
In other words, he's got no evidence. But honestly, what's even more interesting is how the Republican Party seems to be intentionally going after Biden for nonsense that's unlikely to be true, when they could call out clear and evidenced examples of corruption, but they don't. Likely because they enjoy and engage in the same unsavory acts. For example, the Biden administration quietly ended one of the only good policies that went into effect under Trump, and it has to do with increased transparency of foreign influence in Washington. Now, without any explanation, the White House has stopped requesting that American think tanks disclose funding from foreign governments. This is crazy. Now, think tanks act as fronts for various moneyed interests, including government officials for other countries. Shockingly, back in 2020, then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo declared that the Trump administration would be requiring think tanks to disclose details about any funding they receive from outside of the United States. Pompeo announced that the State Department would finally request that think tanks disclose prominently on their websites funding they receive from foreign governments, including state-owned or state-operated subsidiary entities. Pompeo, who's notoriously hawkish on foreign policy, continued to stress the importance of these disclosures. Really, he did, saying that the unique role of think tanks in the conduct of foreign affairs makes transparency regarding foreign funding more important than ever. He's right about that. And look, I definitely understand that this was implemented in 2020, right? So at the tail end of the Trump administration. But nonetheless, it was a good policy. And I don't know why Biden decided to do away with it. But that doesn't matter, because without any explanation, the Biden administration scrapped the requirement and officials have not explained why they decided to revoke it. This should be a massive scandal. In fact, it would be a massive scandal had Trump scrapped the policy like Biden did. Like Rachel Maddow would undoubtedly run endless segments speculating on which foreign actor Trump was in bed with. Unfortunately, foreign financing has only become more and more commonplace in Washington. Regimes abroad love to bankroll American think tanks as a way to influence our politicians without having to deal with regulations like the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which does in fact require foreign lobbyists to disclose their payments and activities. Think tanks can also work to launder the reputations of dictators or other authoritarian international figures. Dictatorships like Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan have all directed significant funds toward America's leading think tanks, splurging millions on the organizations crafting policy for American legislators. More recently, leading Russian kleptocrats have been connected to America's leading think tanks, with groups like the Council on Foreign Relations keeping Russia's wealthiest oligarch a close associate of Putin's, and one now sanctioned by the United States on its board even after Russia's expanded invasion of Ukraine last year. The New Republic also reported that the president of the Brookings Institution was acting as a cutout for Qatari interests after Brookings accepted literally millions of dollars from Qatar's dictatorship. The UAE likes to utilize the same strategy. As part of a far broader political influence and interference playbook, the UAE's brutal dictatorship has, on an annual basis, funneled millions of dollars into America's leading think tanks. In fact, the UAE is now the single largest foreign benefactor overall for several groups, including the Aspen Institute, Brookings, and the Atlantic Council. And as early as the 2010s, the UAE had already become one of the top donors for the Center for American Progress. The money certainly pays off too. Following the UAE's funding, which ran into the millions of dollars, a staff member for the Center for American Progress began helping Emirati officials organize UAE-sponsored trips to the country and began directly advising Emirati officials on how to lobby their American counterparts. And what about the Atlantic Council? Well, according to the New Republic's reporting, the Atlantic Council's ties to the UAE have given the UAE the opportunity to shape the think tank's reports prior to publication, effectively allowing the dictatorship to craft the Atlantic Council's supposedly independent analysis before release. As leaked emails showed, Atlantic Council officials directly reached out to their UAE patrons with offers to edit their text, including material that was to be published under the name of David Petraeus, one of America's best known former military officers. In addition to influencing the lobbying efforts and research analysis of these think tanks, foreign governments, I should say, also pay to have representatives from these groups write glowing op-eds about them. So in early 2023, for instance, CNBC published an op-ed from Atlantic Council President Frederick Kemp, praising the UAE's selection as the host for the United Nations upcoming climate change conference known as COP28. As he wrote, the appointment of the Sultan Al Jaber, the CEO of the UAE's Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, was the ideal choice. Now that op-ed failed to add any disclosures about the UAE's relationship with the Atlantic Council, which by the way shows just how broken our media is as well. But CNBC did later note that there was a problem. They informed their readers of Kemp's ties to the dictatorship and described that relationship as an obvious conflict of interest. Not only was the Biden administration's reversal of the Trump era rule terrible, but one should also ask why we haven't heard a peep about it from the same Republicans who want to make the case that Biden is bought by foreign interests. Maybe influence by foreign actors isn't all that important to them after all, and they're just engaging in theater with their cute little investigations that lead to nowhere. Maybe somehow they don't know what we do. Either way, the word is out there now, and the GOP doesn't seem to care one bit. We should be asking ourselves why. We gotta take a break. We've got more news for you and John Iadarola when we come back.
Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys.
The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one. Here at the Young Turks, we do our best to bring you the most essential news stories of the day, but we can't cover everything in a 2-hour show. And for the rest, I recommend Ground News. Founded by a former NASA scientist, Ground News uses a revolutionary system that analyzes where the news is coming from and gives you complete transparency on the potential biases these sources may have. That way, you can read between the lines of media bias and break free from the corporate media agenda. In arming you with the context and transparency, you'll have everything you need to think critically about the news and build responsible media literacy for yourself and others. With Ground News, you're not just mindlessly consuming the media, you're part of a movement that is working to hold them accountable and get straight to the facts. Break through the filter bubbles, the propaganda, and the bias, and subscribe to Ground News today.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
I got pulled in. They told me, hey, listen, Cenk, we're insiders. We are the establishment. People in Washington tell me that they're concerned about your tone. We think that there's a better role for you, and it's not in 6 o'clock. The problem with the mainstream media is they're desperate to get access. They don't challenge the government. They don't challenge power. We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media.
Components that corrupt our politicians, I think, also corrupt mainstream media. It's really difficult for cable outlets to talk about things like income inequality, wealth inequality, when the advertisers that are funding their shows are the same corporations that want to ensure that the same system continues. People watch digital media or new media, they get a completely different message. They focus on the issues that matter or resonate more with the constituency. We need to know one thing. Is the corporate media incompetent?
Corporate media, I can't hear you. Establishment press, where are you? I can't hear you. But the media's position I am clear on. Everything is pro-war, so everything is just framed that way. In this case, I mean, war is inevitable, right? I mean, the defense contractors should get a couple more $1 trillion. You ready for the stunning results? Only 6% of people say they have a great deal of confidence in the press. Wakey, wakey, okay? Progressives don't like the media either. You know why? It's the corporate media. Corporate media sounds like a conspiracy. Wait. Who owns you? Multi-billion-dollar corporations, public corporations. You have to do corporate media because corporations own us. Yeah, that's how it works. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available. Ice cream.
Saying that they really value being members of the show.
They're saying that?
That's
the word on the digital street?
People are saying.
Okay, everyone calm down. You're true, you're totally right. But we have to talk about other things too.
We gotta give some props to our newest members. We've got, well, first of all, Chris Birch gifted 5 TYT memberships.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
We've got Tony Orsini who became a member, John Siebold, God of Zona, and Zora Atash, who became a member. All these people became members.
Like increasingly epic names.
These are pretty epic names. And
I'm a little
Zora,
scared.
Thank you for the comment. Thank you for thanking us for what we do. We love doing what we do on some days. Actually,
I hope today's one of them.
Yeah, no. I'm in a good mood. I'm in a good mood.
Yeah.
I love Wednesday shows. I love when John's here because I can pick on him. I'm just kidding. We have the banter. We have the banter.
I got that yesterday with Emma on my show.
How did that go?
The show was really good, but yeah, like 2 minutes in, she was insulting me brutally. So I haven't fully recovered, as you can probably tell.
Very nice, very nice. Love to hear it. All right, anyway, we've got a lot of news to get to, including this depressing story that, to be quite honest with you guys, I kind of wanted to ignore, but we should probably talk about it because we do have some updates on Dianne Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein returned to the Senate last week after being away for 2.5 weeks because of a shingles diagnosis. Now, based on a pretty concerning interaction that she had with reporters on the Hill, it doesn't seem like she's even aware that she had been gone for 2.5 months. So what do I mean by that? Well, yesterday, one of her male staffers escorted her on his arm to go vote on the Senate floor. So Jim Newell, who is a journalist at Slate, wrote this. It was about a minute later that I encountered Feinstein coming off an elevator, sitting in a wheelchair and flanked by staff. It's been hard to find the senator since her return. She kept her movements mostly to the least populated passageways and skipped luncheons and non-urgent committee hearings. Now, he asked her, like, how are you doing? You doing okay? And she said, quote, oh, I'm feeling fine. I have a problem with the leg. So a different reporter at that point jumps in and asks what was wrong with the leg. And she says, well, nothing. Nothing that's anyone's concern but mine.
Well, not necessarily, but.
Which, look, all things aside, I do appreciate the salt. Like, she picks up the leg. Someone asks, like, oh, what's up with the leg? She's like, none of your business, okay? Step aside. Okay, but here's where things get bad. Now, according to Newell, when the other reporter asked her what the response from her colleagues had been since she has returned, the conversation took a strange turn, and that's where it kind of became clear that she wasn't even aware that she had been gone for a while, right? So she says, quote, "No, I haven't been gone. You should follow I haven't been gone, I've been working." When asked whether she meant that she'd been working from home, she became a little agitated and said this: "No, I've been here. I've been voting. Please, you either know or don't know."
That's true, Senator Yoda. That is true, but I'm gonna flip it back around on you. Do you know? Do you know? Is there anything more in terms of quotes? Because I'm not 100% convinced.
Oh.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Because I think it might be a little bit of a misinterpretation of what she. Look, I throw this out here because we have, I think, a commitment as a news organization to try to be fair.
No, I think we should be super unfair. Are you kidding me? Of course we do.
Yeah. That said, it's Dianne Feinstein, so it's entirely possible that she doesn't know that she was gone. I had read that she had been back at that point for 5 to 7 days or something, and that you could interpret it as her being like, "No, I've been here, I've been voting, back off. I didn't get back 5 minutes ago, I got back a week ago," rather than I literally was never gone. Who are you? Is there a new episode of Seinfeld coming out tonight?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean.
But it is Dianne Feinstein, so I understand why people would lean towards the other interpretation.
She should resign.
Well, either way, she should resign.
This is all crazy. All of this is crazy.
She should resign effective as of 12 years ago. But yeah, she's not.
I mean, yeah, she's been voting over the past week, so maybe she misinterpreted the question, which is why she got so snippy. Right?
Well, I think she's probably snippy about the entire topic because to whatever extent she can understand the conversations that she's having or remember them, definitely there's been a lot of them about the pressure that's being put on her. I'm sure lots of people have been calling her. So she's probably been increasingly frustrated as the days go by, just not as frustrated or as legitimately frustrated as the entire country is as it sees the opportunity for Biden to shape the judiciary, sort of like blowing away like it's been Thanos.
No, but look, she was asked, okay, what was the response from your colleagues since you've returned? And that's the line of questioning.
Yeah, but couldn't the response have been over the last 5-7 days or whatever? I get what you're saying, and I'm not sure. I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick to my gut instinct. I don't think that she remembers that she was gone for 2.5 months.
That is.
That is
crazy.
A huge possibility. I mean, now you've put some, denial in my head, and there's a possibility you're right. We don't know for sure, and we should be fair. But with that said, I mean, there's now countless reports about what she's experiencing with, mental decline and all of that.
Yeah, that's not disputable.
No, it's not disputed, and the fact that we're all just pretending like this is okay, and by we all, I don't mean us literally. I mean the country, the Democratic Party is a mess.
I mean, there's a lot of people who are denying it, and we're just powerless in the face of it.
That's true.
Dianne Feinstein is basically climate change in human form. We know it's a big issue, but what the hell are we gonna do about it?
She so after deflecting, that question about how she, I know. I know it's funny, your joke, but it's also incredibly depressing.
Yeah. No. I'm crying down the inside of my eye canals. Salty.
So Feinstein has been in Washington and voting for the past week, as we mentioned, while coming to committee hearings on a need-be basis. But it's definitely not true that she's been physically present in the Senate between February and literally last week. Now, her office even declined to comment on the interaction. When Newell spoke to other lawmakers to ask what they think about this whole situation, some were direct, others not so much, okay? So when asked if there was any remaining optimism that Feinstein could regain total function as a member of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Blumenthal, for instance, said this: "There's one job that no one else can do for us, which is to vote. And she's been doing that job in the last few days, and so far as I can tell, she's been doing well."
Good.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse was a little more blunt in not wanting to answer the question. He just said, I'm gonna leave that to the medics. Democrats are embarrassing, man. I mean, that's like the big takeaway for me.
I guess, so she's voting, we're getting judges again?
I mean, look.
That's good,
That's better than where we were 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I just hope that whoever is leading her to her desk and putting her hand over the button has the right motivations, is all, since they're apparently choosing what happens here.
I'm gonna give you a little more information, okay? From a Rolling Stone piece that was written recently, earlier this week to be exact. So multiple sources say that in recent years, Feinstein's office had an all on-call system unbeknownst to Feinstein herself to prevent the senator from ever walking around the Capitol on her own. At any given moment, there was a former member ready to jump up and stroll alongside the senator if she left her office, worried about what she'd say to reporters if left unsupervised. This is a United States senator. It's not a game, it's not a joke. And the fact that we have an entire political party, one that we historically have agreed with on policies, and I say historically because lately, what do Democrats stand for?
Well, I mean, we're more likely to agree.
We're more likely to agree with them, but in terms of like what they've been up to, what they've been working on, what they've tried to accomplish, I mean, there's a lot of rhetoric that's
the Willow
agreeable.
Project.
Right, I mean, anyway, but long story short, this party is increasingly embarrassing, incompetent, ineffective, and corrupt. And that's not to say that I favor the other side. I definitely don't favor the Republican Party, but I just feel so lost in knowing what to do at this point. Like I don't belong anywhere at this point. Democrats, Republicans, no.
I had high hopes for the primary this time around, and it's not looking yet like we're gonna get the primary we wanted.
It's gonna be the same by the way, every presidential election cycle, it's gonna be the same.
I don't agree. I don't think the last three have all been the same. I think 2016, 2020
the Democratic
very different.
Apparatus, the DNC, is not going to allow a progressive to excel. They're just not.
Well, yes, but the question is, are they able to block it? I mean, it was close in 2016. It was very close in 2020.
They'll always find a way to squash.
Well, they're always going to try to. You're right. You're right. I'm just gonna do this. Actually, this is more comfortable.
Good. It's great.
Bring me food eventually, please. No, we still have to fight. If only to fill time, we have to fight.
I know. We'll keep fighting.
Anyway, but yeah, that's totally embarrassing, the staff member thing. It reminds me of, you remember when there's the video of Trump gets out of the car or whatever, and he just starts wandering off the runway and they have to go and get him?
Yeah, like Biden does on every stage after a speech.
You know the most suspicious thing about this entire thing is, as far as I have seen, the Republicans don't care at all. Isn't that weird? There's a senior Democrat who's mentally incapable of doing their job. Not a peep. There's no monologues. There's no.
Why would they care?
Well, exactly. So in some cases they might because they think that they can replace him. In this case, they don't because they know if they put pressure on her, if she gets taken out, we get someone better who can actually do the job, who might actually sponsor legislation, who might meet with constituents. The Democratic Party is acting exactly like the Republican Party here.
No, I mean,
that's crazy and unacceptable.
By the way, you should get used to that. You should have already been used to that. The Democratic Party acts like Republicans all the freaking time.
I understand in terms of some policy. I'm saying in terms of whether you should raise a scandal or not, they should not agree.
Cenk has a theory, and I think it's an excellent one, about why the Democratic Party isn't pushing for Feinstein to resign. And it's because if she were to resign before her term is up, Governor Gavin Newsom in California, where of course Dianne Feinstein is a United States Senator, would get to nominate or appoint someone for that seat until the election happens. Okay, he has committed to publicly filling that role with a black woman. That's what he has said. But the only person that would fit that description would be Barbara Lee, who's a progressive.
Maybe. Maybe from our point of view. I'm not sure from his point of view. Also, he lies.
I mean, who else would it be?
He lies a lot, so he could just be lying. And he could just
does lie a lot, but I feel like
he's
that
a big
kind
old
of
liar. Got to factor that in.
But okay, so what's the motivation then? Why won't Democrats push her to resign and then promote a different Democratic senator to the Senate Judiciary Committee?
I think the Democrats historically have a much greater remaining attachment to the dignity of the Senate and the traditions and the norms. And especially very few Democrats want to set a precedent where we're like critically looking at their ability to do their job and eventually pushing them out the door, because every one of them wants to hold office until they're 1,000 years old. Biden, I mean, you could criticize him much the same way. Do they want to open up a national conversation about pushing elderly politicians out when they can no longer do the job? So I get why they don't want to do it, but I also think we're GD California, we deserve an actual progressive just as a treat. One time in our life, an actual progressive who represents one of the most progressive states in the country.
It's embarrassing, man. Super embarrassing. All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including a massive update having to do with Riot. And when I say Riot, I mean Riot Games.
I know.
Which you know a thing or two about. I saved the gaming stories for the Rolla.
Thank you. I begged because she just wanted to do it on her own. I was like, no, it's gaming, give me it.
I wrote like, a really great segment. I was planning to do a solo episode on it. But I was like, no, I don't want to be greedy. I want to share with John.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. Is she not merciful?
Come right back. We've got that story and more. Ice cream. Welcome back to our social break. There are a lot of comments to get to, but I'm gonna read my favorite one in our YouTube member section. Constant Chaos says, it's not neolib to say that communities should be properly compensated for their areas being used. It's just common sense. I totally agree. And anyone who says it's neoliberal to provide financial support to these communities who are supposed to shelter and feed like migrants is insane. How is that neoliberal? Neoliberalism would basically be exactly what these cities are dealing with right now, which is no help with resources. And you're on your own, deal with it. It's so gross. Anyway, let's go to, man, there's so many comments. Our Twitch community. So we've got Melanied44, Melanied44, who says, the rich don't want to fix immigration because they profit from it and use it as a wedge issue, 1000%. I mean, companies exploit undocumented immigrants for labor all the time, and they can underpay them, they can abuse them and mistreat them. What are they gonna do? They're gonna go to the authorities? Like, that's the unspoken part of all of this. It's disgusting. That's why Republicans don't actually wanna do a damn thing about immigration reform. Trueville666, resubscribe for 13 months. Remember to tip your landlords. Did I do that story with you?
Yeah.
That story
the
was
TikTok?
insane. Yeah, that was insane. Resto Dragon says, you want the good breaks? Sure, $90 a month. Don't give them any ideas. Did you hear about the car subscription stuff?
I hate it.
Crazy. Yeah. Verity NS, resubscribe for 36 months. Yo, 3 years. #2strong.
Nice.
Mojo Quid says the GOP doesn't care because they have to protect Daddy Trump. There's not one single thing they're accusing Biden of that Trump hasn't actually done. I know, but that law, like that rule that forced think tanks to reveal who their donors are, including their foreign donors, that was implemented by Trump. Like I can't believe that Biden revoked that. That's such a dumb idea.
I didn't see that actually.
Yeah. Just said, oh, so you're not watching the first hour. Okay, I see how it is.
I was preparing for the second hour. I take my job seriously.
Okay, let's get back to the show. Hey friends, welcome back to the show. Two stories I want to do in this segment, starting with a gaming related story. You ready?
Bring it on.
Let's do it. Video game publisher Riot Games is starting to pay out its $100 million settlement in response to a gender discrimination case. Now, the vast majority of that money will be offered to every single one of the 1,548 women who worked at Riot Games between 2014 and 2021. The rest of the money will cover legal fees and other expenses. Now, in case you're not familiar with Riot Games, they're pretty profitable. They do real well for themselves. So it's a massive studio that's actually behind multiplayer games like League of Legends and Valorant. Do you ever play Valorant?
No.
I prefer Valorant over League of Legends.
What's your favorite part of it?
All of it.
Me too.
All of it.
No, anyway, no. Yeah, no, look, League of Legends is one of the top 3 games in terms of hours spent that I've ever played in my life, but I've never played any of their other games really.
Well, they made $2.1 billion in revenue in 2017 alone.
That's pretty good.
So
half of that was from me.
They'd be making the paper. They're making the money. So the settlement, by the way, was finalized in late 2021, and it was approved by a court last summer. So let's rewind, okay? Let's talk about what the case was about, why there's this massive $100 million settlement. So under the terms of this settlement, Riot will make initial payments, this is not a small amount of money, of between $2,500 and $5,000 to women who work there, with an additional sum based on role and tenure that could rise up to $156,056. Pretty good. Now, if you're wondering just how bad the conditions at Riot were to justify this kind of money, this kind of settlement, buckle up, I'm gonna walk you through it. Starting with a piece that was written by Kotaku back in 2018. They did a lengthy investigation into this. Here's what they found. 3 women described being groomed for promotions and doing jobs above their title and pay grade until men were suddenly brought in to replace them. Both male and female sources have described seeing unsolicited and unwelcome pictures of male genitalia from bosses or colleagues.
Is this Succession?
It's just disgusting, but that's not all, there's more. So one woman saw an email thread about what it would be like to penetrate her, in which a colleague added that she'd be a good target to sleep with and not call again. Another said a colleague once informed her, apparently as a compliment, that she was on a list getting passed around by senior leaders detailing who they'd sleep with. Wow, I'm sure she really appreciated that. I mean, how unbelievably ridiculous and socially awkward are these guys? Where they're like, oh, here's a compliment. Oh, you're on a list that we're passing around. I'm sure you like that.
It's similar to some of the Blizzard stuff that had come out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like as bad, I guess, as stereotypical bros are when you get people with, on average, obviously, less social skills. But then they create an environment where they feel like they now get to be the bros. You can overcompensate and be even more toxic. In any event, I'm glad that, or do you have more details?
Yeah, other things that were part of this, or complaints that were part of this case and settlement included women, sharing their ideas and getting those ideas rejected. And then when a guy comes in and he says the same thing, proposes the same thing, he's like celebrated and his ideas are implemented. You know, it's like those types of situations would pop up, and it was very clear gender-related discrimination.
I mean, that does sound bad, but like imagine if there had been a culture where like they would give the ideas that they had and the guys would reject them out of hand. But then the guys would have the ideas and the management would like them.
No, but that's exactly what happened.
I'm kidding, I was just demonstrating it. Anyway, doesn't it sound better though, people? Anyway, look, I am very familiar with Riot Games, both this story, it was great reporting by Kotaku that initially unveiled it. I've played thousands of hours of League of Legends. Great game, but the culture has always been toxic in a lot of different ways. It's just one aspect of the toxicity. I'm glad that they are getting the money. And who knows, if you were to ask the 1,000+ women, does this make up for what you experienced? Some maybe would say yes, but like imagine, like if your career was held back for literally years, does $10,000 make you whole? Does $100,000 make you whole when you could have gone on to lead game studios?
Look, that's definitely a good point. But what I would say is, okay, just to back up a little more to give you a sense of how serious the settlement was. Initially, the settlement was for $10,000, and the courts are like,
for everyone?
$10,000 total. Like the settlement now is $100,000. I'm sorry, 100 million. My bad. $100 million.
$10,000 gonna get them lunch?
I'm an idiot. Not 10,000. 10 million. I misspoke. So initially the settlement was for 10 million, and then the courts looked at that and they're like, no, it's not enough, and they increased it to $100 million. Okay,
good.
So I give you that context, and I think that context is relevant because what this does is it sends a message not just to Riot Games, but to any one of these gaming studios, gaming companies that might engage in similar practices and think that they can do so with impunity, right? So I say that because I think that it could potentially, and I hope it does, open opportunities for women in the gaming industry. You get what I'm saying?
I hope. I do wonder. Like there are not a lot of game companies that are as profitable as League was or Riot was, at least back then. I don't know how popular it is these days. So even then, like $100 million sounds like a lot of money, but if you're pulling in $2 billion in 1 year, like I'm not saying companies will consider it a cost of doing business or whatever, but like I kind of wish that they'd gone even farther to the judge to send a stronger signal. I'm glad that they're doing this. Gaming is only one job industry that has pervasive sexism that holds people back and produces worse products as a result of it, worse services as a result of it, by the way.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? And by the way, I think that this is a wonderful update to a horrible story involving very clear mistreatment of people, discrimination. So I'm not at all trying to justify what was taking place prior to the settlement. But I am curious what you think about, the gaming industry, historically speaking, has attracted a male workforce, mostly male workforce. And I feel like whenever the majority of people in the room or all of the people in the room are of one gender, you just behave a little differently, no?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, do you?
Yeah, 100%. If I'm hanging out with my girlfriends and it's just us women, we definitely act differently than we would if we're in a mixed gender environment.
Sure.
So my point is, when more and more women come into the industry and they're part of the company, you have to adjust your behavior. And I just think these guys didn't think.
Yeah.
Either they didn't think they needed to, or they were just oblivious to how inappropriate their behavior was.
Or both.
Or both.
Or didn't know how to.
Exactly.
Yes, I agree. I would also add the context though. It's one thing to act differently when you're in like a single gender environment or whatever, but it's also a workplace anyway, which should also modify your behavior. I mean, I think like me and just my guy friends hanging out at like our house, I would assume is gonna be different than at work.
I mean, I've read ESPN stories about what transpires in male locker rooms for professional athletes. Like I've
heard from the president what locker room talk is like.
I'm not even talking about locker room talk. I'm talking about like weird, like, I don't know.
No, I get what you're saying, but Riot Games is a massive like massive corporate entity. It's not a high school locker room.
No, that's not about high school. I'm talking about like.
Sure, whatever. I'm just saying like, yes, and I think those behaviors should be modified too, but this is a massive pod of programmers and executives and graphic artists. This isn't like a rock and roll or something. Like you're producing entertainment. Like you're programming something. You should be able to be professional.
What is it with these kids and their rock and roll? I don't
know what music do you listen to. It's grunge. Okay, it's not grunge, everyone. Anyway.
No, I hear you. I hear you. I totally hear you.
Yeah. Now, what I like is that I think a lot of people have been seeing that things have been moving in the direction of more equality. There have been some great, very well-received games that have been made in part or in whole entirely by groups of women, single women. Mythic Quest, which is a popular show on Apple TV, set at a game developer, has a ton of women, including women who are acting on the show who have themselves been part of the games industry. And episodes have been focused on aspects of either exploitation of workers in the gaming industry, on sexism in the gaming industry. And so it's good to see that. Because it's not only better for the workers, as I was getting to before, like if you are shutting out the perspectives of tons of people who are passionate about your product, you're gonna produce a worse product.
Yeah, look, Pam Durgent in our members section just stated it perfectly, and I kind of wish you stated it this way so we wouldn't have to have this like drawn out conversation about it. Anyway, Pam says, how you act around your girlfriends and how you act around your colleagues at work should be different regardless of gender. Simple.
I agree, yeah.
Simple.
Should I restate that as my own?
No, she already
It might be more socially acceptable. Okay.
No, I agree, I obviously agree.
Nice.
And yeah, if the culture is changing, meaning it's progressing in a good way, it's more inclusive, you see more diversity in the workplace, be cognizant of that and be sensitive to that.
Yeah, or like, because look, changing a whole culture can be hard. Don't talk about penetrating people.
Oh God.
Don't use the word penetrate at all, outside of the 2 times I just did.
Yeah,
I get a pass.
You're totally right. It makes me cringe.
Use literally any other word.
Yeah, no, just don't talk about it in a workplace setting. Anyway, all right, well, we gotta take another break.
Sorry.
But it's okay because when we come back, folks, we're going to talk about yet another beer company that has upset conservatives. That and more coming right up. Ice cream. ISB brother Wolf, John, thinks that you and I argue like siblings.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think we would have made good siblings.
Totally, I would definitely beat you up as if I were your older sister for sure.
I'd work hard to get big and strong though.
But by the way, you are big and strong now.
By the way, I'm big and strong.
Nerd.
Oh my God, all right, I've got comments. All right.
Thank you, Bart.
Let's go to Zora. Thank you for your super chat. You became a TYT member. You gave us a super chat. Really, really appreciate you. Jason Ray, as always, has several super chats here. Let's start with the first one. So predatory capitalism isn't a good thing. Got it. I'm guessing that was in relation to the housing story I did. Jason Ray also says, how does our supposed national defense military allow this BS? How is this not treasonous conflict of interest? I don't think the military, I don't know if you're referring to the military here or if you're just talking about DHS, but Yeah, we shouldn't allow foreign dictators to bribe our politicians, and they're kind of doing that through these think tanks, and it's a problem. Chris Birch says, hey Anna, nice Jean Harlow hairstyle yesterday. Just hearing Comer's voice makes me know it's safe to say any of these House right-wingers won't be splitting the atom anytime soon. Have a great evening. Thank you for that laugh, I loved it. Hal Blair you says, hi Anna, this is your buddy Clueless Ron. You know, the one who loves salsa music. Oh yeah, it's your birthday today. Happy birthday. He's turning 33. I'm so honored that you like my tweets. Also, you have beautiful hair.
Yeah, beautiful hair.
I looked up Jean Harlow. I gotta go back and take a look to compare.
Yeah, you know what? I gotta say, I like whipped my hair up like real quick yesterday. I just didn't like the way it looked, so I did this like side bun. And it looked pretty good. Looked pretty good.
Let me take a look.
You know, I might have like a second career, a little side hustle as a hairstylist, maybe, maybe. All right, Neil Whittington. I like that name, Neil. Like Cenk attempted to run for office, the world needs to catch a new clue, and all of you run for office, praying that you win this time. I will not be running for office. They would destroy my life. And by they, you know what I mean. Like what they did to Cenk was so disgusting.
Oh my God, that was
the freaking lies that they printed about him. The New York, like, I can't get over how unbelievable that was. Like, even if he had a squeaky clean record and never said anything controversial, they would have just made things up. Because guess what? They did make things up. I can't do it. Not for me. Anyway, let's get back to the show.
I like beer, still like beer.
Alpha Dog agrees with me and disagrees with John. It's really important for you all to know this. Alpha Dog writes in and says, Anna's right on this one, John. Give it up. If Feinstein was in her right mind, she would have known they were referring to all the time she was gone. Get it together, John.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that she knew or didn't know. She could be doing what she thinks of as a clever little evasion. And a salty one at that. You said you noticed her salt. She was in salt mode.
Oh, no. I liked, what was that one line? You either know or you don't know. I'm just gonna say that now anytime Jake says something I disagree with, even if it makes no sense in that context. You either know or you don't know.
And never tell him where that's from.
I know. All right, let's get to the rest of the show because this one's a doozy. The most important thing happening in the country right now is the kind of advertising beer companies do, apparently.
Obviously.
Yeah.
We watched Anheuser-Busch like torch their valuation, and now Miller Lite is saying, quite literally, hold my beer, as we go down that same path. And I don't think it's crazy to say that good-looking women in bikinis sell beer. Like, nobody wants to buy beer from Lizzo.
Real classy. Republican lawmaker Matt Gaetz shaming the musical artist Lizzo in response to Miller Lite's latest ad. I mean, I don't even want to say new ad or latest ad because their ad came out before the whole Dylan Mulvaney thing happened.
Yeah, but why would a congressperson be expected to know literally anything about what he's talking about?
Like, so his whole argument about like, oh, Anheuser-Busch, man, over the Dylan Mulvaney thing, you'd think that, you know, what is the beer company behind Miller Lite?
Coors, I think.
Oh, Coors, that's right. You'd think Coors would know a thing or two. Except they came out with this ad before anyway to celebrate Women's Month.
Yeah, but what you're talking about is a fact.
I know, it's inconvenient.
Why are you doing that? That's not as much fun as just pretending that it's a new thing. Because they desperately want to continue the narrative. And they can't find anything new to do that with. So they're like, I guess we'll talk about an old thing and then pretend it's new or whatever. You said of him, how classy, and you were being sarcastic.
Of course, yeah.
And I get it. He was being classless with his Lizzo thing. He was also being misogynistic and racist on purpose. But my issue with him there and all of them is not that they're not being classy. It's that they're being ignorant in terms of the timeline and incredibly, incredibly pathetic and weak. Like Like how they're not trying to manipulate me with women in bikinis. Where else am I gonna find women in bikinis? You little baby, just go literally anywhere else on the internet.
So we have now talked about this far too long without showing you the ad that has triggered them. So let's watch the naughty, triggering ad that has upset people like Matt Gaetz.
Women were among the very first to brew beer ever. From Mesopotamia to the Middle Ages to colonial America, women were the ones doing the brewing. Centuries later, how did the industry pay homage to the founding mothers of beer? They put us in bikinis. Wow. Look at this wild. It's time beer made it up to women. So today, Miller Lite is on a mission to clean up not just their but the whole beer industry's Miller Lite has been scouring the internet for all this and buying it back so that they can turn it into good for women brewers. How, you ask? Ladies, take it away.
First, we turn the bad into compost. Then we feed compost to worms. Push out beautiful fertilizer. That good helps farmers grow quality hops,
which is then donated to women brewers to make their own really good
But there's definitely more out there. In your attic, in the garage, in your parents' basement. Send any you got into Miller Lite and they'll turn that into good too. So here's to women, because without us, there would be no beer.
Isn't it amazing how no one, I never even noticed these ads, never cared about these ads, wouldn't even ever notice them had it not been for Republicans crying about it. And I guess Coors should send them a check and thank them because we're talking about them when we otherwise wouldn't. I don't know. It's
I guess
just
that's true.
And by the way, honestly, I don't remember the last time I saw a bikini-clad beer ad.
I don't remember last time I saw a beer ad. Well, other than that one, I guess it was a minute ago. Yeah, they were hearkening back to 4 decades. That is how it was sold. I remember an episode of Married with Children, which was about the filming of a beer ad that was supposed to be about people in bikinis and everything. Look, I get that they don't actually care about the ad. Matt Gaetz is not actually offended by it. All of this is performative. If you're conservative, I understand that you don't care. You want to get worked up into a rage about the women's, but he doesn't care at all. All of this is, as always, a distraction to get you to think that, oh, I'm a part of a thing that's fighting back against a corporation, as you support politicians that want to continue the Trump tax cuts and hand trillions of dollars to the richest people and corporations in the country. So have fun being a part of this con. They have an issue with the fact that they acknowledge that women were instrumental historically to the creation of beer. Can you imagine if you ever denied one of the successes or victories of a historic white man? They would lose their minds, and yet accurately portraying history causes them to melt down. And the last story that we were talking about was about sexual harassment, okay? I know exactly how conservatives would talk about a case like that. Not every place has to be for you. Come on, this is like a men's thing or whatever. And yet in this case, just briefly, something not being about you, about a man, causes them to freak out. We should take down the entire corporation.
What I think is super interesting is how topsy-turvy this political world is right now, right? Where just because they want to own the libs, conservatives who traditionally want women to cover up, who want to ban porn, who think that teachers are grooming children, like all of a sudden they're like, we must maintain the bikini-clad women in these beer ads.
On TV that kids can see.
What?
Yeah, because it's not about an actual principle.
No, but like nothing makes sense. You're right. It's not about principles. It's not about anything other than one side likes it, and since I'm on the other side, I gotta hate it.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't care. I don't care about the ad. I don't care if they decide they want to go back to using bikini-clad women. I don't care. I don't care. This is nonsense that has no impact on your life. None. Look, I get it, ladies. Some of you get offended by it. You don't like to see it. But guess what? Some women are proud of their bodies, and some women have no problem being in bikinis or being depicted that way. Some women literally want to be topless as they walk through the streets of New York City. Yeah. They want that to be legalized. I don't care. Look, I think it's a completely made up, manufactured drama. 100%. That's meant to distract us with nonsense fighting. Who cares? Companies put out ads that they think will help them maximize their profits. That's why they do it. Okay, Republicans know this, Democrats know this, everyone knows this. Are we just gonna spend the entirety of this fiscal year focusing on beer ads? Is that what Matt Gaetz got elected to do?
There's nothing more Anna Kasparian than referring to it as the fiscal year in casual conversation. You do actually think about fiscal years. Yeah, you're 100% right. They make ads. Back in the 80s, they made the bikini ads to manipulate men. Right now, you could say they're making that ad to manipulate women because that's what they do. Matt Gaetz, that's what they do.
No, but that's exactly right. And I get it. I get that I'm supposed to watch that ad and be like, girl boss.
I mean, I learned something. I thought it was interesting.
I learned nothing and I don't care. I just don't.
You did. It's in your head.
I think it's patronizing, like to pander to us the way they do.
It's an ad. They're all patronizing. Yeah. They want you to patronize their business, so they patronize you. That's what an ad is.
That's exactly right. So you know what I do? I ignore it. I tune it out. I gotta be honest with you, the reason why I didn't learn anything from it is because I was so bored that like I started thinking about other things. Because it's just an advertisement for beer. That's it, that's all it was.
Yeah.
That's all it was.
Yes, yes. And by the way, them producing one ad that doesn't have bikinis in it is not the government banning bikinis or anything. It's the decision of one ad team for one ad. Whatever. Also, another fact, like he said, they want to crater the stock price like Anheuser-Busch. There's almost nothing more frustrating in our job than people just repeatedly saying something that has absolutely no bearing on reality, and it being incredibly easy to verify.
Yeah,
their stock has not cratered.
Let's talk about that. Let's actually give you the receipts on that. Graphic 3, a quick look at the Anheuser-Busch stock chart shows the company at its 1-year high of $66.57 on April 3rd of 2023. By April 12th, the price dropped to $63.38. However, the retail investors, just like the beer buying public, apparently have a short memory. By May 4th, stocks were back up to $65.90. In all, Anheuser-Busch is up by nearly 11% over the past 6 months. I bet the fact that we spent an insane amount of time talking about Bud Light had something to do with it. Could it be perhaps that Bud Light, or I should say Anheuser-Busch, much like Coors, much like any other company, engages in advertising practices meant to drum up conversation about their product?
Yeah.
Could it be?
No, it couldn't. Yeah, and by the way, it's not like this is new highs or anything. Like 2 years ago, their stock price is higher. This is just, if you look at it over 5 years, this is just natural variation, that entire thing. But for me, I think boycotts can be perfectly justified. I just would prefer that they be rational. But how can you expect that conservatives are gonna be any more rational with their next boycott? When they launch a boycott, it doesn't do anything, but every one of them is convinced that it destroyed the company that is still very much there. There's just no facts anymore. There's no shared information. There's no reality we can all point to and say, I might have different aspirations, but I at least accept that that thing exists.
I'll let you have the last word on that, and let's just move on to me potentially defending Candace Owens. Are you ready for that?
I don't know that I am. Can I have a Coors Light, please?
Okay, let's do it.
We spent $18,000 on 3 seats so that my kids could sleep overnight. You might be saying, well, that's a lot of money, Candace, to spend on seats. Let me see access. Let me have access to your debit card in the way that you spend, right? People that waste their time drinking on the weekends. Everyone gets to decide what they value in life. Me, making sure my kids are rested when we're doing an overseas 10-hour flight, having to deal with jet lag the next day is worth it.
Candace Owens gets real defensive all the time. And I don't know why she felt the need to respond to criticism after she decided to spend $18,000 on airplane tickets for her children.
I think I know why.
She wanted, to put them in business class. She's super rich. She's very wealthy. So I think that she got swindled here. But are they going after her because as a rich woman, she wanted to spend top dollar to put her kids in business class?
You're saying she got swindled on the tickets?
Yeah, $18,000 for business class tickets sounds insane to me.
I wouldn't even know because why would I ever even look at them?
Okay, I mean, yeah, exactly.
I would never be able to afford them.
I'm in the same boat as you are, so I'm like, I don't know, $18,000 sounds like a lot of money, but we do have our stage manager here who used to work at airline companies, and apparently it's
a lot of
reasonable.
Money. Jeez. Well, it's overseas, I guess. Whatever. I don't look. She is wealthy. She can spend her money on whatever she wants. All of that is true. She's getting defensive because the facade, the story is that they are regular people. They're populous. They live lives like their viewers. They're regular. It's not true.
I thought they lived their lives like they're capitalists every single day, Chink.
I guess I get the reference. But every one of them wants to pretend that they are not the exact sort of elitist that they demonized in every one of their shows.
No,
they're not. If you could spend $18,000 on literally anything at the drop of a hat, you are an elitist.
I know, look, I totally get that, and that is a very valid point, right? I can't stand the faux populism from the right wing. I can't stand when they pretend like they're anti-elite when they themselves are part of the elite and justify the worst actions of the elite. But putting that aside for a second, something that has increasingly got on my nerves as I've gotten older, even though I would never have the resources to spend $18,000 on a plane ticket, is
you could get a car for that.
Everyone get off everyone else's balls, okay? No, get off everyone else's balls. First of all, like, I don't post anything on any social media platform these days because everyone's looking to nitpick, like, I see that.
Which emoji is that?
I see it's Meatless Monday, but you shared a photo of your dinner and there's meat in it. You get what I'm saying? Like, get off my balls. Like, I can't stand. So she wants to spend $18,000 on tickets for her kids. Have at it. First of all, I don't care. I don't need to know about those details.
I don't care. I assume she spends money much more wildly than that.
If I had kids, I would probably spend every last dime on making them happy, and I would probably do unreasonable things to make them make them happy. Did I say unhappy accidentally?
I don't know. Now I'm a little bit worried. Your Freudian slip could signal danger ahead.
I'm not a fan of Candace Owens, but if she wants to spend $18,000 on tickets, who cares?
I don't care if she spent the $18,000, but I do think the reason she's being defensive is she wants a perception of her that she knows isn't true.
Okay, so here are some more details on the story. So the whole kerfuffle, by the way, started on Monday with a series of like enraged tweets.
How does anyone know about this, by the way?
I don't watch her show, and by the way, she preemptively blocked me on Twitter, so yeah.
Now I'm curious, I gotta check. You read the graphic, I'm gonna see if I'm blocked.
So she wrote this: traveling with 2 children under 2, booked 3 business class seats because it was a 10-hour overnight journey and wanted beds. We board plane to find there is full power outage on only our 3 seats. They cannot recline. TVs don't work, cannot charge our phones. British Airways captain came over and apologized and said they would refund us. Obviously, just got off the phone with British Airlines and they are offering only $200 voucher. That's capitalism, baby. That's capitalism.
Okay, I'm kind of on her. Like,
does she want to regulate them?
Ooh.
You want to regulate them, Candace?
By the way, that whole $200 travel voucher.
This story just got real interesting.
Yeah, and that travel voucher is even worse because you have to pay like a $100 fee to use your travel voucher. So that's not gonna buy much business class.
Oh no, I love this story even more now.
Look, I'm on her side in terms of if you pay $6,000 and everything is broken, then you should get something for that. But I'm generally not on the side of people who can afford to spend $18,000 on flight. Also, she just tweeted out that she spent the $18,000.
No,
so that's
she did. Now I get it. Now I understand how this all came to the public's
I'm less critical of her actually as a result of this. If it was that somebody leaked that she spent the $18,000 and now she's all defensive, I'm more critical than if she just openly admits she spends $18,000. Then I don't know why you're getting defensive. You admitted it. You should know that that's crazy.
But also, Candace, like, welcome to like traveling for everyone these days, right? Like, is she shocked by this? Like, how are you shocked that they just gave you that value? And by the way, like, I don't know, she's a public figure, she wants a full refund, so she's she's blasting them with her huge following in order to get what she wants.
You're allowed to.
I'm not
assuming
against
she's
it.
being honest about what happened.
Right. Anyway, maybe we'll talk about this more in our bonus episode for our members, tyt.com/join, and we'll see you there.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really